The Seattle rain fell in relentless sheets, the kind of storm that blurred headlights into hazy orbs and made the city seem like a watercolor, painting dissolving at the edges. Maxwell Donovan pulled his coat tighter as he stepped out of his Tesla, the cold drops running down his face and soaking into the Italian leather of his shoes. He should have been heading straight to the Donovan Technologies boardroom, where 12 restless directors waited to scrutinize quarterly reports and debate a billion-dollar merger. Instead, he found himself weaving through puddle-slick sidewalks, searching for something simple: coffee that wasn't served in crystal pitchers under fluorescent lights. He wanted warmth in a cup, something ordinary. He turned on Pine Street, his mind already rehearsing talking points about market share and expansion into Europe, when movement under a bookstore awning caught his eye. Two small figures huddled there, pressed against the glass of a shop long since closed, their thin jackets no match for the storm. At first glance, they were just more of the forgotten Seattle's hidden children, clinging to corners and doorsteps. But as the neon streetlight flickered across their faces, Maxwell froze. Two little girls, no older than 8, stared back at him, identical, pale skin, tangled copper hair plastered damp against their cheeks, and eyes, God, those eyes, amber green, flecked with gold in a way that no photograph or memory could ever fully capture. His chest constricted as if the air had been ripped away. For 30 years, he had tried to bury the memory of a girl with those exact eyes, Elizabeth Winters, his first love, the only person who had ever made him believe that money didn't matter, that life was bigger than ambition. And here, in the storm, 2 children wore her face. "Spare change, mister," the one on the left spoke first, her hand trembling as she stretched it toward him. Her voice carried a softness that was eerily familiar, a musical quality that once echoed in whispered promises behind high school bleachers. "For our mom's medicine," the other added, clutching a worn teddy bear that had lost an eye and most of its stuffing. Her words pierced deeper than the wind cutting through his coat. Maxwell stood paralyzed, raindrops dripping from his hairline, pulling at the edge of his collar. His billion-dollar empire felt like dust in that moment, worthless in the face of these 2 fragile beings who had somehow resurrected a ghost from his past. He swallowed hard, his voice strained in his own throat. "Where's your mother?" The first twin looked down at her. "Shoes, waterlogged and torn. Hose," she mumbled, as if the word itself carried too much weight. "Hospital," the second whispered. Finishing for her, "She's real sick." The traffic behind him hissed against the wet pavement, but he barely heard it. His heart hammered. In his chest, memories colliding violently with the present. Those eyes, that hair couldn't be coincidence. "What's her name?" he asked, his voice low, nearly breaking. The girls looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them that only twins seemed to know. Then, together, they said, "Elizabeth." The sound of it struck him harder than any boardroom ambush, harder than any market crash. The name he had whispered into the night 3 decades ago. The name he had dreamed of, but never spoken aloud since his parents told him she had moved away. He nearly staggered back under the awning, the storm outside nothing compared to the one inside his chest. "Elizabeth Winters," he forced out. Though the answer was already clear in their faces, they nodded. The one with the teddy bear hugged. "Ed closer," her voice tiny but certain. "Doctor says she only has 3 months." The rain pounded harder on the awning, but Maxwell barely noticed. In that instant, the world he had built, his towers of glass and steel, his endless meetings, his carefully curated life crumbled like wet paper, because standing before him were not just the shivering children. They were mirrors of the girl he had loved and lost. They were the faces of his past, returned in the most impossible way, carrying a truth he wasn't ready for, but could no longer escape. And as he knelt in the puddles to meet their eyes, Maxwell Donovan knew that everything in his life was about to change. The rain had not stopped by the time Maxwell called for a taxi. Though his own Tesla sat waiting just a block away, he didn't trust himself behind the wheel, not with his pulse hammering like a war drum and his vision clouded by 30 years of ghosts. The twins sat on either side of him in the back seat, their small shoulders pressed together as though the very act of being apart might undo them. The scent of rainwater and old teddy bear filled the cramped space. Maxwell's custom suit, soaked through, clung uncomfortably to his skin, but he hardly noticed. He was too busy stealing glances at them, at the familiar tilt of their brows, at the freckles spattered across their cheeks, exactly the way Elizabeth's had been, The driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror. Seattle Grace, right? Maxwell cleared his throat, forcing his voice to steady. Yes. Room? Do you know the room? He asked, turning toward the girls. 412, Lucy said promptly. The practical one, the organizer. Lily just nodded, clutching her bear as though it were the last rope tethering her to safety. Room for 112. The number lodged itself in his chest like a nail. He gave the driver a tight nod, then fell into silence. The car jolted over potholes. Neon lights smeared across the rain-slicked windows. The city alive with noise and motion, while Maxwell's world shrank to the size of two fragile figures. Beside him, he thought of the board meeting he should have been leading. A table full of investors tapping pens and whispering about his absence. He thought of Margaret, his mother, cold and composed, ready to tighten her grip on the empire if he faltered. For years, he had measured his worth in numbers, billions, acquisitions, market shares, but here were two numbers that mattered more than any balance sheet. Room for 112, and 3 months. When the cab stopped, Maxwell stepped out first, holding the door against the rain. Come on, he urged gently. The girls hesitated, then took his hands, small, damp, trembling hands that somehow steadied him more than he steadied them. Seattle Grace rose above them, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. The automatic doors hissed open, spilling warmth and antiseptic air over them. The sterile brightness of the hospital cut through the storm's gloom. But Maxwell felt none of its relief. His heart was a drumbeat of dread. The hallway leading to room for 112 seemed endless. Every beep of a monitor, every shuffle of nurses' shoes seemed to echo with inevitability. When they reached the door, Maxwell stopped. Through the narrow window, he saw her, Elizabeth Winters. She was thinner, paler, her copper hair cropped short and dulled by illness. Her once vibrant eyes were closed, lashes resting against sunken cheeks. Machines blinked around her, keeping vigil, marking each breath as if daring the world to forget she was still here. Maxwell pressed his palm to the cold glass, his throat tightening until he could barely breathe. 30 years had passed, yet in an instant he was 18 again, standing at the train station as she promised to wait for him, her voice carried by the wind. And then the silence that followed, the letters that never came, the heartbreak that calcified into ambition. A doctor's voice broke through his trance. Excuse me, a man in a white coat said, clipboard tucked under his arm. Are you family? Maxwell straightened, his instinct to command authority snapping reflexively into place. I'm an old friend, Maxwell Donovan. His own name sounded foreign, like it belonged to another life. How is she? The doctor's eyes flickered. Professional, but shadowed with sympathy. I'm sorry, without family consent, I can't discuss details. Lucy tugged at Maxwell's sleeve, her voice barely audible. They told Mom. 3 months. Maxwell's head snapped down, his gaze locking with hers. Her eyes glistened, but didn't spill tears. Too much weight for someone so young. Is that a long time? She asked. Maxwell felt the ground drop away. He looked from Lucy to Lily, both of them clutching each other like shipwrecked survivors, waiting for an answer he couldn't give. His empire, his wealth, his intelligence, none of it gave him words to explain that 3 months was a blink, a cruel countdown that no child should ever have to face. The doctor cleared his throat. Perhaps we should talk in my office, Mr. Donovan. Maxwell nodded numbly, but his eyes stayed on Elizabeth through the glass. He wasn't ready to step inside, wasn't ready to see her up close, wasn't ready to face the 30 years of lies that had stolen his life and hers. But he knew this. Whatever time remained, he wouldn't let her walk it alone. And as he finally pushed open the door to room for 112, the storm outside seemed to quiet, as though the world itself was holding its breath for what was about to unfold. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and wilted flowers, the kind left alone on a windowsill. Machines beeped steadily in the background, each sound a cruel reminder that time was no longer infinite. Maxwell stood frozen just inside the door, his hand tightening around the frame as though he needed the support to keep from collapsing. He had prepared himself for many things in life: hostile takeovers, billion-dollar negotiations, public speaking before thousands, but nothing could have prepared him for this. Elizabeth Winters lay before him, a fragile echo of the vibrant girl he had loved. The copper hair he used to thread through his fingers had thinned, cut close to her scalp. Her skin was pale, nearly translucent under the harsh fluorescent light. and her body looked small against the wide hospital bed, yet even in illness, she radiated something familiar, something eternal. When her eyes fluttered open, amber green and hazy, his heart lurched. "Lizzie," he whispered, using the name no one else had ever called her. Her lips parted. A faint, breathy sound emerged, carrying 3 decades of distance in a single syllable. "Max." He moved forward, pulling a chair beside her bed, lowering himself carefully as though afraid his presence alone might shatter her. His hand trembled as he reached for hers, thin and cool, veins etched like delicate rivers beneath her skin. "I'm here. I'm really here." Tears filled her eyes, sliding slowly down her cheeks. "Am I dreaming?" "No." His voice cracked. "This is real." The twins hovered nervously near the door until Elizabeth spotted them. A tired smile softened her face. "You found him," she whispered. Her gaze returned to Maxwell, and for a moment he saw the girl she had once been, mischievous, fierce, alive. "They brought you." Maxwell nodded, swallowing a lump in his throat. "Somehow, fate led me to them." Elizabeth coughed weakly, the sound rattling in her chest. "I thought you moved on. When you never wrote back, when the years passed." Her eyes closed briefly, pain flickering across her face. "I thought you forgot me." The weight of her words crushed him. He shook his head, grief and fury colliding inside him. "I never received a single letter. My parents told me you left, that you didn't want me." His voice dropped, bitter and sharp. "They lied to us." Her fingers tightened weakly round his. "I knew it," she whispered. "I kept writing anyway. 30 years, I kept writing." Maxwell blinked. "Writing? Letters? Where?" Elizabeth gave the faintest nod toward a worn wooden box on the nightstand. "They're all there. Every milestone, every memory. For you, for Charlotte." The name hit him like a thunderclap. Charlotte. Elizabeth's lips quivered. "Our daughter." Maxwell's breath left him in a rush, as though someone had struck him across the chest. "Our what?" The twins glanced up sharply, confusion mirrored in their identical faces. "Mommy," Lucy said softly, stepping closer. "You told us Grandpa was gone." Elizabeth wept openly now, her fragile body shaking with the effort. "I had no choice. They kept us apart. I raised her alone. Max, I raised Charlotte without you." A sob tore from his throat, raw and ragged. He pictured a child, a little girl with Elizabeth's hair and his eyes growing up without him, believing he had abandoned her. "Where is she?" he choked out. "Where is Charlotte?" Elizabeth's face crumpled. "She's gone. A car accident last year. She and her husband. They didn't survive." The words slammed into him like a wrecking ball. For 30 years, he had been denied the truth. And now, when it finally reached him, it came laced with death. He had lost a daughter he never even knew existed. The room swam before his eyes. His knees weakened, but he forced himself to stay steady for Elizabeth, for the twins, and them. He asked hoarsely, gesturing to Lucy and Lily. Elizabeth's trembling hand brushed the edge of her blanket. "Her daughters, our granddaughters, all I have left of her." Maxwell turned to look at the girls again, and this time he saw it clearly. Not just Elizabeth's features, but traces of something else. Something of his own bloodline. The shape of their jaws, the way their eyes narrowed when they were cautious. His legacy lived in them. He rose, pacing to the window, staring out at the rain-slicked city. A billion-dollar company, a penthouse, a private jet, all of it felt meaningless compared to the staggering truth unfolding in this sterile room. He had been a father without ever knowing it, and now he was a grandfather, standing at the edge of losing everything again. Elizabeth's voice pulled him back. "Promise me," she whispered. Her eyes were fierce now, a dying woman's last reserves of strength. "Promise me you'll take care of them, that they won't be left alone." Maxwell turned, his face wet with tears he hadn't realized were falling. He stepped closer, kneeling at her bedside, holding her fragile hand to his lips. "I promise," he said, his voice fierce with conviction. "On my life, I'll protect them. They'll never be alone. Not again." Elizabeth's body sagged. With relief, her eyelids fluttering shut. For a moment, the only sounds were the machines and the storm outside. The twins stared at him, wide-eyed, the enormity of what had just been spoken hanging in the air. And Maxwell Donovan knew this was no longer about his fortune, his empire, or his carefully controlled life. This was about love, about family, about redemption, and he would burn the world down before he broke that promise. The storm outside had begun to ease, but inside Seattle Grace the tension only deepened. Maxwell hadn't slept. He'd stayed in the chair by Elizabeth's bed all night, holding her hand when she drifted in and out of restless sleep, watching the steady drip of the four as though it were a countdown clock. The twins had curled up on the waiting room sofa, their heads pressed together, one clutching her teddy bear, the other staring silently at the fluorescent ceiling dot by morning. The air in the hospital seemed heavier, as though the walls themselves knew time was running out. A nurse came in, gently checking Elizabeth's vitals, then gave Maxwell a sympathetic look. "She's asking for you, and for the girls." Maxwell crossed the room, gathering Lucy and Lily. They shuffled in, their shoes squeaking softly on the linoleum floor. Elizabeth smiled faintly, her eyes bright despite the shadows of illness. "Come here, my angels." The twins climbed onto the bed carefully, curling into the fragile warmth of their grandmother's embrace. Maxwell stood back, letting them have the moment, but Elizabeth's eyes flickered toward him with urgency. She waited until the girls were distracted with a storybook from the nightstand before whispering, her voice low and firm, "CPS is coming today. They'll want to take them." Maxwell's jaw tightened. "Take them where?" "To foster care." Elizabeth rasped, "They say I'm not fit anymore, and they're right. But they don't know you, Max. They don't know you're their blood." Her eyes burned with desperation. "Don't let them disappear into the system. Promise me again." Before he could answer, the door opened. A man in a suit stepped in, carrying a leather folder. His badge identified him as Nelson Parker, Child Protective Services. He had the weary, measured look of someone who had done this too many times. He glanced at the twins on the bed, then at Maxwell. "Mr. Donovan." Maxwell squared his shoulders. "Yes, I understand you've identified yourself as a potential guardian for the children. I'll need to ask you some questions." Elizabeth's hand tightened around Maxwell's. Her whisper was almost a growl. "Don't let him take them." Parker gestured toward the hallway, and Maxwell reluctantly followed him out. They stood in the sterile consultation room, the rain still visible against the glass beyond. Parker set his folder down. "I'll be frank. The girls have no legal guardian once their grandmother passes. If you are indeed related, we'll need DNA proof. Even then, custody evaluations, background checks, home studies, these things take months. In the meantime, they'll remain in foster placement." "Foster care," Maxwell repeated, his voice laced with disbelief. "Do you have any idea what they've already lost? Their parents, soon their grandmother, and you want to place them with strangers?" Parker's tone remained calm, professional. "With all due respect, sir, you're a stranger too. You met them yesterday." Maxwell's chest heaved, his control fraying. "I am their grandfather. Their mother was my daughter. A daughter I never knew existed because my own mother intercepted every letter Elizabeth ever sent me. Now I have a chance to give those girls the life they deserve, and you're telling me bureaucracy stands in the way?" Parker didn't flinch. "Mr. Donovan, it isn't just bureaucracy. Your lifestyle raises concerns. You run a global company. You travel constantly. You have no history of parenting. It's my job to consider the best interests of the children." Maxwell leaned forward, his eyes like steel. "And what if I change my life? What if I step back from the company, restructure everything? Money isn't an obstacle. I'll hire the best nannies, tutors, therapists, whatever they need." Parker's expression softened slightly, but he shook his head. "Intentions aren't enough. The system has procedures." He closed the folder. "Your DNA test is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Until then, the girls remain where they are." Maxwell's fist clenched at his sides. He could buy skyscrapers, influence markets, sway senators with a phone call. Yet here, faced with a civil servant and the fragile lives, his billions meant nothing. As Parker left, Maxwell's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. "Rachel Wells." His coup, he answered. His voice clipped. "Max, the board is in chaos," Rachel said without preamble. "They've called an emergency meeting. Your mother is pushing for you to be declared unfit to lead. She's telling them you've gone unstable." Maxwell closed his eyes, the weight of it pressing harder. Of course Margaret would move. Now, circling like a vulture, while his attention was on Elizabeth and the twins. "She intercepted Elizabeth's letters," Maxwell muttered, almost to himself. "She stole 30 years from me, and now she's trying to take what's left." "Max," Rachel pressed, "if you don't come back and fight, she'll have the votes." She's already positioning herself as acting CEO. Maxwell looked through the small window at Elizabeth, at Lucy curled against her grandmother's arm, at Lily stroking the teddy bear's frayed ear. His empire was burning behind him, but in that moment, it felt like smoke compared to the fire raging in his chest. "Tell the board," he said, his voice low and firm, "that for the first time in my life, I found something worth losing everything for, and if they want me gone, let them try." He ended the call and stepped back into Elizabeth's room. She was watching him with eyes that still held fire, even in her frailty. "She'll come after them," Elizabeth warned softly. "Your mother, she'll try to claim them. She already offered me money to send them away." Maxwell's blood went cold. He bent closer, his words fierce and certain. "Not this time. Not them. I'll fight her with everything I have." The machines beeped on. The rain tapped against the glass. And in that room, Maxwell Donovan realized the war for his granddaughters had already begun, and it would be unlike any battle he'd ever fought before. The following day dawned gray, the kind of Seattle morning where the clouds hung low and the entire city seemed to move slower. As though it too was burdened with grief, Maxwell had barely slept. He had spent the night pacing his penthouse, replaying Elizabeth's warnings, the CPS agent's words, and his mother's manipulative voice in his head. Each thought sharpened the truth. The twins' lives now rested in his hands, and every force that had conspired to keep him from family before was rising again to tear them away. At dawn, he returned to the hospital. Elizabeth was weaker, her eyes duller, her breathing more labored, but she insisted on speaking while she still had the strength. With trembling hands, she directed Maxwell to a small canvas bag tucked beneath her bed. Inside was a storage unit key, a slip of paper with the number 424 scrawled in fading ink. "Charlotte's things," she whispered, her voice cracked. A whisper pulled from somewhere deep within her fading strength. Photos, papers, her work. She was brilliant. "Max, you need to see it. Don't let it die with me." Maxwell promised he would, though his heart ached with every word she forced out. When the twins came in, she smiled faintly, brushing her fingers against their hair. Her gaze shifted back to him with a kind of desperate clarity. "There, all you have left of her, and she's all you have left of me." Those words haunted Maxwell as he left the hospital later that afternoon, the key burning a hole in his pocket. He drove to the storage facility on the edge of the city, a place that smelled of dust and memories long locked away. Unit 424 was dim, lit only by the flickering fluorescent overhead. But the moment the door groaned open, his chest tightened. Inside were cardboard boxes stacked neatly, labeled in Elizabeth's careful handwriting: Charlotte School, Charlotte College, Charlotte and James, the girls' baby books. He knelt before them, his hands trembling as he reached for one marked Charlotte work. The box was heavy with files and binders. As he opened the first, his eyes widened. Flowcharts, algorithms, research proposals stamped with Neurosoft. The words leapt off the page: predictive diagnostics, artificial intelligence integration with hospital systems, early detection modeling. His daughter, the daughter he had never known, had been building a company, and not just any company, one that might have revolutionized medicine itself. Maxwell sat back on the cold concrete floor, pages spread around him. His throat tightened. Charlotte hadn't just been brilliant, she had been his mirror, the entrepreneurial spirit, the hunger to create something that outlasted her. She had inherited that from him. And now, looking at the careful notes in her handwriting, the sketches of algorithms that could save lives, he realized what Elizabeth meant. This wasn't just research, it was a legacy. He thumbed through a binder and froze when he reached a folder marked Patient Prediction Protocol. The notes were detailed, sophisticated far beyond what any underfunded startup should have achieved. It described an AI system that could analyze patient records and identify risks of critical illness years before symptoms appeared. One line stood out, underlined in Charlotte's handwriting: could detect pancreatic cancer 3 to 4 years earlier. Life-saving potential. Maxwell's breath caught. Elizabeth. If Charlotte's system had existed, if it had been fully funded and completed, it could have caught her cancer before it spread. His daughter had been trying to save lives, including perhaps her grandmother's, and no one had given her the chance. The sound of small footsteps jolted him from his thoughts. He turned to see Lucy and Lily standing in the doorway of the unit, their small frames silhouetted against the light of the hall. Robert Turner, Elizabeth's neighbor, lingered behind them. They insisted on coming, Robert explained. Said they wanted to help. Lucy stepped forward, her eyes sharp, scanning the papers scattered on the floor. "Mommy's writing," she whispered, picking up a sheet covered in equations. She studied it for a moment, her young brow furrowed. In concentration, she used to show me things like this. She said it was her secret language. Lily crouched down beside a photo album instead. Flipping it open to a picture of Charlotte at graduation, she ran her small fingers over the glossy surface. "That's Mommy," she said softly. Then she looked up at Maxwell, her eyes wide and wet. "She looks like you." Maxwell's chest ached. He reached for the photo, his hands trembling. It was true. Charlotte had his eyes, his jawline, even the determined tilt of his chin. And he had missed it all. Her childhood, her triumphs, her struggles. Because of lies, because of his mother. Lucy looked up at him with surprising seriousness. "Can you finish it?" she asked, holding up the folder marked patient prediction protocol. The computer thing, the one Mommy was building. Maxwell swallowed hard. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I can try, and I'll make sure her work doesn't get buried." "Grandma said Mommy's work would help people," Lily added, hugging her teddy tighter. "If you finish it, does that mean Grandma might stay longer?" The innocence of her question cut deep. Maxwell drew both girls close, pulling them against his chest. "I don't know if it can help her now," he whispered, his voice breaking. "But it can help others, and it can keep your mother's dream alive." Lucy nodded solemnly, already carrying the weight of a child far older than her years. "Then you have to do it. For her. For us." Maxwell looked around the storage unit, at the fragments of a daughter's life he had never known, and felt something ignite inside him. A fire that went beyond grief, beyond guilt. This wasn't just about saving his granddaughters anymore. It was about finishing what Charlotte had started. It was about honoring Elizabeth's faith. It was about redemption. And as he closed the storage unit that night, clutching Charlotte's research against his chest, he knew the battle ahead wasn't just with CPS or his mother or even the board. It was with time, with fate itself, and he would not lose. The storm that had battered Seattle days before seemed to have moved inside Maxwell's life, swelling and crashing around him. Every moment since Elizabeth had placed that storage key in his hand had felt like stepping deeper into a labyrinth, where shadows whispered secrets, where every discovery cut him deeper than the last. Charlotte's research still lay open on his desk, page after page of brilliance that could have saved lives, maybe even Elizabeth's. Yet while he pieced together his daughter's unfinished legacy, another storm gathered on the horizon, one that had nothing to do with disease and everything to do with power. Rachel, his coup, stood in front of his office window, arms folded, her eyes scanning the rain-dark city skyline. "Max," she said carefully, "I've seen the proposal Margaret sent to the board. She's calling it a restructuring plan, but let's not play games. It's a coup. She's lobbying shareholders, promising stability, whispering that you've become erratic." Maxwell leaned against his desk, Charlotte's binders stacked like fragile monuments behind him. He looked exhausted, but his voice was steady. "She's always played the long game. I should have known she wouldn't stop at breaking my personal life. Now she's reaching for the company too." Rachel crossed to him, lowering her voice. "She's not just pushing papers, Max. I've seen things, emails, meeting notes claiming you've missed deadlines, made irrational decisions, even sabotaged the merger." Maxwell frowned. "Those are lies." "I know," Rachel said, "but they look real. Someone inside has been helping her." The air shifted, colder than the rain beating on the glass. Maxwell thought of Charlotte's files, of the strange folder she had labeled DT security breach. He pulled it from the stack. Flipping it open, his blood ran cold. There, in meticulous detail, Charlotte had tracked irregular data transfers, suspicious login patterns, financial movements that traced back to Donovan Technologies. At the center were the names, Margaret Donovan and Alan Weiss, head of cybersecurity. She knew. Maxwell whispered. His fingers trembled as he traced Charlotte's handwriting. Charlotte discovered they were bleeding the company, selling secrets to competitors. She tried to warn someone. Rachel leaned over his shoulder, eyes narrowing. "This explains why Margaret is moving so aggressively. If Charlotte had exposed this, she did." Maxwell interrupted, his voice breaking. With a mixture of awe and sorrow, she wrote that she had a meeting with Margaret 3 days before the accident. The word hung in the air like smoke. Accident, rain, skid marks. A car twisted against the guardrail. For a year, Maxwell had accepted the story at face value. But now, You don't think Rachel started, then stopped. Unwilling to finish, Maxwell slammed the binder shut. I think my mother destroyed Elizabeth's letters, stole my daughter from me, and now I'm staring at evidence that suggests she might have had a hand in Charlotte's death. Silence fell, broken only by the ticking of the clock. Then Maxwell's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a message from his security chief. Weiss contacted federal authorities, wants immunity, claims he has proof Margaret orchestrated espionage and more. Maxwell's heart pounded. He looked at Rachel, his jaw set. It's time the board hears the truth. That night, he gathered everything: Charlotte's files, Weiss's signed testimony, the financial trails, the falsified emails Margaret had planted against him. He barely noticed the twins asleep on the couch behind him, their tiny bodies curled together, unaware of the war their grandfather was preparing to fight. He tucked a blanket around them gently, pausing to study their faces. Elizabeth's eyes, Charlotte's smile, pieces of himself he had almost lost forever. The next morning, the boardroom was packed, every seat filled, murmurs humming through the air like static before a lightning strike. Margaret sat at the head of the table, immaculate as always in a charcoal suit, her pearls catching the light. She looked at him as though he were already defeated. "Maxwell," she said coolly, "I didn't expect you to attend. This meeting concerns my removal." He finished for her, striding to the center of the room. He didn't sit. Instead, he placed a thick folder on the table, letting the weight of it thud against the wood. "Yes, I know." A hush spread. All eyes shifted to him. Margaret's smile didn't waver, but her hand twitched slightly against the polished table. "I've been accused of being unstable, distracted, unfit," Maxwell continued, his voice carrying the controlled power of a man who had built an empire from nothing. "But the truth is simpler. While I've been caring for my family, I never knew I had, thanks to lies told decades ago. Someone else has been bleeding this company dry." He opened the folder, sliding copies of documents across the table. "These are financial transfers, secret meetings, security breaches, all traced back to Alan Weiss and Margaret Donovan." The room erupted in murmurs. Margaret's face flushed, her composure cracking. "This is outrageous. Fabricated, really." Maxwell cut in. He held up Charlotte's journal, its pages filled with neat handwriting. "This is my daughter's research. She discovered the breaches over a year ago. She scheduled a meeting with Margaret to expose them. 3 days later, she and her husband were dead." Gasps filled the room. Margaret's lips parted, but no words came. Maxwell's phone vibrated on the table. He picked it up, pressing speakers so the room could hear. A voice came through, calm, professional. "This is Special Agent Rivera with the FBI. Mr. Donovan, we have Alan Weiss in custody. He's confirmed Ms. Donovan's involvement in corporate espionage. He's also provided testimony regarding threats made to your late daughter." The boardroom fell. Silent, every face turned toward Margaret. Her mask finally shattered, rage flashing in her eyes. "You ungrateful child," she hissed at Maxwell. "Everything I did was for you, for your future. You stole my past." Maxwell said coldly, "You cost me my daughter. You almost cost me my granddaughters, and you dare call that love?" At that moment, the door swung open. The agents stepped in, badges raised. "Margaret Donovan," one announced, "you're under arrest for corporate espionage, fraud, and obstruction of justice." As they led her away, her heels clicking sharply against the marble, the board sat in stunned silence. Maxwell remained standing, his chest heaving, the weight of 30 years pressing down on him. But behind his fury, behind his grief, was something stronger: resolve. His war with Margaret wasn't just about a company anymore. It was about Charlotte, about Elizabeth, about the twins who were now his world. He turned back to the board, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "Donovan Technologies will survive, but only if we remember that family isn't an obstacle to success, it's the reason for it. And my family will never be stolen from me again." The room erupted in whispers, but Maxwell barely heard them. He was already walking out, already thinking of Lucy and Lily waiting for him at home. He had confronted the darkest truth, and he wasn't done yet, because somewhere, in the shadows of Charlotte's unfinished work, another revelation still waited, and it would change everything. The morning light in Seattle broke through heavy clouds like a reluctant truth. For days, the storm had lashed the city, but now the drizzle had softened to a gray mist. Inside Seattle Grace, Maxwell Donovan sat at Elizabeth's bedside, his hand wrapped around hers as if holding her here could anchor her against the pull of the inevitable. Her breathing was shallow, ragged, but her eyes were open. Those amber-green eyes so familiar, so fierce flickered between him and the twins curled up at the foot of the bed, their small fingers entwined in silent solidarity. Lucy's face was taut, brave beyond her years. Lily clutched the worn teddy bear to her chest, rocking it absently as if comforting herself. Elizabeth turned her head slowly toward Maxwell. "You did it," she whispered, her voice like thin paper tearing in the wind. "Did what?" he asked, leaning close, his throat aching. "You faced her," Elizabeth breathed. "Margaret, you finally saw who she was. I was afraid you never would." Maxwell's grip tightened. "She's finished. The FBI has her. She can't hurt you anymore. She can't hurt the girls." Elizabeth's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Not me," she whispered, shaking her head slightly. "She already hurt me. She hurt Charlotte. But promise me, Max. Promise me she won't take Lucy and Lily. Promise me you'll fight, no matter how ugly it gets." Maxwell bent until his forehead touched hers. "I swear to you," he said fiercely, his voice cracking, "on everything I am, I'll never let them go." A single tear slipped down Elizabeth's cheek, but her eyes softened. She turned her gaze to the twins. "My girls," she murmured, "you must be brave now. You must hold on to each other, always. No matter what happens, love will find you. Don't leave us, Grandma." Lily whimpered, tears spilling freely now. Elizabeth drew in one last breath of strength, her trembling hand reaching for theirs. "I'll always be with you," she whispered, "every sunrise, every dream. And when you feel alone, look for me in each other's eyes." The monitor gave a sharp beep, then another, before flattening into a continuous tone. Nurses rushed in. But Maxwell knew. He knew before they even tried. He gathered the girls into his arms, shielding their eyes as tears blurred his vision. Elizabeth Winters, the only woman he had ever truly loved, was gone. The funeral came 3 days later. Rain drizzled lightly over the small cemetery as, though even the heavens wept with them, Maxwell stood in a black coat, the twins gripping his hands on either side, the casket lowered into the earth, and with it, 30 years of what-ifs and stolen time. Robert Turner was there, head bowed. A few of Elizabeth's neighbors, her co-workers from the diner, her quiet circle of people who had known her without knowing the magnitude of her sacrifice. Maxwell spoke briefly, his voice thick. "She was my first love, the woman who raised our daughter alone, the grandmother who gave everything for these girls. Elizabeth Winters lived with courage and left us with love. That is her legacy." But even as he laid her to rest, the war with Margaret was far from over. That evening, after the twins had fallen asleep in their new bedrooms, Lucy curled under her math notebooks, Lily clutching a sketchbook filled with drawings of her grandmother. Robert knocked on Maxwell's penthouse door. His face was grave, his hand clutching a small flash drive. "Lizzie wanted you to have this," Robert said quietly. "She made me promise to give it to you after she was gone." Maxwell took it with shaking hands, dread and anticipation tangling in his chest. Later, alone in his study, he slid the drive into his computer. A single video file appeared, dated 1 week before Elizabeth's death. He clicked play. Elizabeth's face filled the screen, gone, but her eyes blazing with truth. "Max," she began, her voice stronger than it had been in her final days, "if you're watching this, I've left this world. There's something I couldn't tell you in person, something about Charlotte." Maxwell leaned forward, heart pounding. "When I found out I was pregnant all those years ago, your mother came to see me," Elizabeth said. "She offered me money to disappear. When I refused, she threatened me. She said if I tried to tell you, she'd ruin you, cut off your future. I didn't take the money, Max, but I stopped trying, because I thought I was protecting you." Tears burned his eyes as he listened, fists clenched. Elizabeth's voice hardened. But she didn't stop there. "After Charlotte grew up, she found you. She wrote you a letter, introducing herself. She wanted to know her father. Margaret intercepted it, and when Charlotte confronted her at a tech conference, Margaret told her you had read the letter and that you wanted nothing to do with her, that you had a family of your own and no room for her." Maxwell's chest heaved, his body trembling with fury. "Charlotte never tried again," Elizabeth said, her voice breaking. "She died believing you rejected her, and I need you to know that was never your fault. She loved you, Max. She wanted you. Margaret stole that from both of you. The video ended, leaving Maxwell in silence, his face wet with tears. He pressed his palms to his eyes, but the image of Charlotte, his daughter, haunted him. A brilliant woman who had carried his blood, his drive, his fire, but had died thinking her father abandoned her. He rose abruptly, pacing the room, rage and grief surging like twin fires. He had evidence now not just of Margaret's corporate crimes, but of her cruelty. He would expose her, destroy what remained of her empire, not for revenge, but for Charlotte, for Elizabeth, for Lucy and Lily. The next day, he stood before cameras at a press conference announcing the official launch of the Charlotte Anderson Protocol. Behind him, projected onto a massive screen, were Charlotte's algorithms, her life's work resurrected. The room was filled with doctors, investors, and reporters, their faces rapt. "My daughter Charlotte," Maxwell said, his voice steady, despite the storm inside him, was brilliant. She built a system that could detect diseases like pancreatic cancer years before traditional methods. She never lived to see it completed, but today, we finish her work. Today, we honor her name. The applause was thunderous, but Maxwell barely heard it. His eyes fell on the front row, where Lucy and Lily sat in matching blue dresses, their eyes shining with pride. That night, as the twins built a blanket fort in the living room, Maxwell crawled inside with them. Lily handed him a flashlight like it was a royal scepter. Lucy looked at him gravely. "Grandpa," she asked, "was the bad lady the reason Mommy never met you?" Maxwell swallowed hard, tears stinging again. "Yes," he admitted, "she told lies that kept us apart. But your mom loved you, and she would have loved me, too, if we'd had the chance." Lucy placed her small hand on his. "Then we'll love you enough for her." Maxwell broke then, pulling them both into his arms. The storm outside had finally passed, but inside, the grief still lingered. Yet beneath it, for the first time in decades, there was hope, because love, he realized, wasn't just a memory of what was lost. It was the choice he made every day to stay, to fight, to protect Dot. And with Elizabeth gone, with Charlotte gone, Lucy and Lily were the future he would never again let slip away.